with our iPhones now.
It's amazing.
Yep.
Two, check, check. Check, check. Pretty impressed. You guys got quite quick. So we'll go ahead and get started, and as folks trickle in along the way, we can they can just kind of catch up where we left off. So real quick, I'm just going to do an introduction. My name is JT Chevalier. I'm the Public Information Officer for Alpine County, as well as the Economic Development Director. Was the former interim Community Development Director, but I'm excited to announce we've added a couple folks to our team, so I'm just going to introduce them right now just so you can see their faces. In a community as small as Alpine, it's always good to see your public servants. And so Sam Booth, if you'd like to stand up real quick. This is Sam Booth, our Director of Community Development here in Alpine County. Probably don't want to give him too many technical questions right now. This is day 6 on the job, but we're excited to have Sam. Real talented, and I think we'll do great things for the Community Development Department. And then I believe Ethan Gray is here. Oh, right. It's a good thing you weren't a rattlesnake, Ethan. Ethan is our Deputy Director of Community Development too, and so I think we got a great 1-2 punch, and excited to have them. And so when you see them in the community, feel free to bend their ear about all things community development or all things Alpine County. But really excited to have you guys here today. This was a big lift to get these folks together, to get them in the room, and so that we can have a comprehensive fire recovery conversation with you folks. And we understand the importance of this and the gravity of this as being residents of Alpine County and community members. So first and foremost, thank you guys for being here today. It really helps get this information out. Any folks that aren't here today, if they would like us to share any slides, anything along that sort, feel free to reach out to me, or you can reach out to anybody in Alpine County. We'll make sure to get those slides to you. And hopefully we'll be able to record this. Not the most technically savvy when it comes to recording video on an iPhone, but we're going to do the best that we can. And so we appreciate your patience if we don't get it perfect. But yeah, so we'll just jump right into it. The format of this today is going to be a series of cascading presentations from local land managers, agencies, fire departments, utility companies, to really kind of create a map of what we're doing today, and that's fire recovery and restoration here in Alpine County post-Tamarack fire. So we want to thank all these organizations for being here today. You can see all those logos up on the screen. A lot of folks working in the county and trying to get this restoration and recovery in place. So real quick in the agenda, we'll go through some introductions, defining recovery and restoration, an overview of the projects along the roadway into the landscape. These are kind of more subject matter based presentations. Mitigation projects and collaborators, because we still have some mitigation projects even within the fire boundary. Conclusions, and then at the very end we'll have an opportunity for questions. We guarantee and know that there will be questions generated through this. What we ask you to do is write those down, put a pin in it, understand that we're going to be going through a bunch of cascading information, tying a lot of things together. And so if your question is not answered by the end, we're happy to answer questions and stay here as long as we can to make sure your questions are answered. So just want to put that out there right now. If you got a burning desire to ask a question, we ask you to just keep it to yourself for now, and then we'll get to that Q&A opportunity at the end. So here's the cast. We're just going to go through some quick introductions, and then we'll kind of get into the meat of the presentation. So of course, me, we got Clint Celio here. He's our wildfire projects coordinator for Alpine County. Clint did the big lift getting this all together today, getting all these agencies, getting this slide deck together, so a big thanks to him. We got Bob Heifel from Caltrans as the PIO. I have terrible eyesight, so I'm gonna have to cheat. Elliot Jones, Vegetation Management, Liberty Utilities. John Bell, California Office of Emergency Services. Annabelle Monty, Forester, U.S. Forest Service. Paul Fuselier, Tamarack Fire Projects for the Bureau of Land Management. Matt Setti, Project Manager, Storm Crow. Don Hittenmiller, Property Manager, Pleasant Valley. Dan Canfield, or Canfield? Am I saying that right? Canfield, sorry. He is the District Superintendent for State Parks. Chris Hartnett, Coordinator for the Alpine Fire Safe Council. Brian Newman, Assistant Chief of CAL FIRE. Andy Lovell, Alpine Trails Association. Kimmer McAfee, Executive Director of Alpine Watershed Group. And David Griffith from the Alpine Biomass Collaborative. So now I'm going to turn it over to Clint, and he's going to talk a little bit about defining recovery and restoration here in Alpine County.
Awesome, thank you, JT. Wow, at 4:45 I was like, oh, room's empty, this is going to be a short meeting. Shoot, should have locked the door. Well, I'm very grateful though that you've all showed up. It's been quite an exercise to put all this together. Really appreciate all of our partners, some of which who are meeting me for the first time after handing me slides and content and hoping that I would do right by them in this presentation. So really appreciate everybody coming out to see this. We'll provide some good information, hopefully start some really good discussion. So as part of starting that discussion is coming up with exactly this. You know, we're here to look at all the different things that are on the menu out there in terms of post-Tamarack fire recovery and restoration and everything that everybody's doing. We have a lot of different landowners and agencies and jurisdictions here who are in charge of trying to implement some of this stuff and whatnot. And yet, you know, we want to try and do it not in a vacuum. We want to try and get a sense of trying to do this across the landscape in a somewhat measured way. And so this is an attempt to do that. It's as much an information sharing opportunity for those agencies who are working on it as it is an information sharing opportunity for you. We have a lot of information that went into these slides, and then the point of having the map on the right-hand side is so that if we want to dive into, with our discussions, anything further or anything else, we can definitely do that. So this isn't just about trying to bore you with a bunch of information, it's actually trying to generate some discussion. So in generating that discussion, you know, what does recovered look like? What is that target that we're trying to shoot for? And we all have that in our mind. Maybe it's, you know, this nice open space stand here. Maybe it's a little more dense. Maybe it's a beautiful under canopy forest. All kinds of different ideas about what that recovery looks like. And then ultimately, how do we get there? Because, you know, we're not dealing with an annual crop here. This is going to take a day or two to come together. So we have to kind of look at it from the perspective of what does that target look like 5 years from now? What does it look like 25 years from now? How do we begin to measure those steps to get there? And those are important discussions that we not only start tonight, but that we continue to have on into the future. One of the key concepts that keeps coming up, and I wasn't certain when I started this effort whether it was going to be something that everybody was going to agree to, but it does seem to be a common theme here, is some sort of resilient forest. And by resilient, that's something where fire is and wildfire is a process within that system that we can all live with, that isn't a huge threat, that isn't a huge risk, and that is something that occurs in there naturally and doesn't destroy either the forest, the community, or whatnot around it. So that concept of a resilient forest is important. And now, does that resilient forest, should it be, you know, targeted on what it was before pre-European settlement? Not really sure. You know, that's a question that's up for debate here. There's a number of different forest types here in Alpine County, eastern Alpine County in particular. We have the dense understory, lots of dense trees and whatnot. We have open brush with trees, we have meadows and whatnot. Some of these are more resilient to fire than others. Some can have a fire go through and you're okay, and others, it completely destroys the stand. it's really, it's really important to define our goals in order to achieve them. So we really have to begin this discussion of, okay, what does that begin to look like? Well, here's some examples of potential resilient conditions that actually existed within the Tamarack fire. These are some photos of locations that withstood the fire without without a significant amount of direct suppression resources. The photo on the left-hand side is from the Poor Boy area. The fire went through there about 2 in the morning, so the wildfire behavior and weather at that time was much easier than it is earlier in the day. And on the right-hand side, this photo is from Turtle Rock Park, literally right out the door. You can take a look at this as you leave here this evening. And again, that fire was raging through here at about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and yet this particular group of trees over here managed to do pretty well. So here's some examples of some resilient conditions that survived the Tamarack fire. Now, if we look at things sort of historically, we can definitely see, though, that there have been some changes to the landscape in terms of sort of forest encroachment. This is a comparison of some photos in Hope Valley from the 1920s to just a couple of weeks ago. And you can see that there's a significant amount of encroachment of those trees. The stand not only got denser along the hillside, but also crept down into the meadow a little bit more. You can barely make out sort of the trail of the road down there on the older photo, and that is kind of getting obscured by the trees today. So this notion that we want to return to maybe what it was before, that means that we're probably going to have a lot fewer trees out there in that forest. These historic photos around Markleyville provide an even more stark example of that. You can see in the 2 upper photos, there's not much in the way of trees around Markleyville at all in the late 1800s. Now, arguably that could be because there was some logging, but there is nowhere near the amount of remaining debris or anything like that that would come from logging operations of a clear cut of something that you see down there today, right? So if there were trees there, and there probably were a few more, it certainly wasn't anywhere near the stand density that you see down there below. So if we're talking about a resilient forest and bringing that landscape back to a historic or potentially prehistoric perspective, we kind of have to use that as a reference point as to, okay, is that something that we really want to do? Do we really want to have that much bare ground around Markleyville? I'm not sure. Another reference point we have here is the Acorn Fire, which went through Woodfords on July 29th, 1987. This is kind of a before or right at the time and after picture of that. The photo on the left-hand side shows the landscape shortly after the fire, a month or 2, while they were doing some salvage logging with the sky crane that they had up there. And just a couple of weeks ago, here's the same picture from literally the same vantage point. You can see the notch in the hills there and whatnot. I had to Photoshop that cloud in there. We don't have clouds around here anymore. But you can tell that we're nowhere near back to the same tree density that we had prior to the fire, and that the brush has come back with a vengeance there. This is another good example of where that landscape has grown back to a very thick carpet of brush. We don't have a lot of trees coming back in this particular photo, in this particular area. And this kind of talks about that 40-year time frame. If we're looking at that step of what we want this area to look like in 40 years, is this it? Now, this photo, which is actually just Mesa Vista and above, provides a little bit of some variation in that. You can see that there is, the laser pointer works and everything. Here is the trees up at the top that really didn't burn in the Acorn Fire. So you've got pretty much the forest that was there prior to that fire. Then this mid-level slope, this mid-slope area, has a lot of brush that has come back, but there are some open spaces in between there. It may not carry a significant fire through there. Up in the upper left-hand corner, though, it's hard to tell in the photo here, but you could see that there was a lot of trees that were there that came down, but those haven't regenerated. They've not come back here just yet. And then of course, you know, what we have back in Mesa Vista now is a pretty constant brush landscape right through there. So a fire in that particular area is definitely carrying with it a tremendous amount of risk to property and life. Another important part, though, to the acorn fire recovery is this area here. It's hard to tell in the photo at this distance, but there is quite a few trees here that have regenerated in that area. And again, we're looking at the 35-year interval. Now, most of this regeneration probably occurred due to some aerial seeding and whatnot that was maybe 5-ish years after the fire, and managed to hit at just the right time. There was a seeding exercise. Got the seeds into the ground, the spring was just right, and that regeneration has occurred. This is great. It's begun to bring the forest back that we want, but are we getting to the point where now we've closed the canopy with the brush and the trees, and it's time to start doing some work in there? So again, this is that 25-year interval. Kind of what is this looking like? And this becomes again a reference point for what we want to do with the Tamarack fire. The Washington fire gives us a little bit better example of what this looks like in the maybe 5 to 7 year interval, right? So the Washington fire was in 2016, back up there by Wolf Creek, and then burned all the way across over past Monitor Pass, really into where the Tamarack fire went as well. You can see really the impetus for a lot of the hazard tree mitigation projects that we went through. Without doing that hazard tree mitigation, a lot of these trees are going to fall down. They're going to be next to the roadway and in the campgrounds. They're going to either break off halfway, but they're going to be coming down in the next few years. You also have quite a few trees that, without clearing some of that biomass off the landscape, that remain on that landscape and may have an effect on regeneration within there. So this is kind of an idea as to what it's going to look like 5 to 7 years from now. So the question really becomes, if we're restoring and we want to restore what it used to be, it's a little difficult to determine what it used to be. Is that based on a historic reference point? Is that based on what it was just before it burned, 100 years before it burned, 500 years before it burned, right? Fires have now changed that forest structure and potentially species mix of what that used to be. So we may not be able to really get back to what that was. That encroachment of those trees into Hope Valley has actually created a little different landscape than what we might consider what used to be. And then most importantly, some of our communities may not be able to survive those prehistoric fire regimes. What used to be is going to create a tremendous danger to our communities, especially at the higher elevations like in Hope Valley and Kirkwood. The warmer and drier climate may ultimately change our definition of what a resilient forest is at this point. So this kind of begins to speak to this notion of the natural range of variation. The natural range of variation basically says, okay, well, let's have a mosaic on the landscape so that we can have fire interact in that landscape, and yet it does not have a detrimental effect across the entire landscape. We get rid of, or we kind of prevent these large areas of moonscape that we see out here now. We get some spaces between the trees, we get a mix of grasses and shrubs and that sort of thing, so that we kind of break that up. And we have a bigger range of variation out there. Maybe we have pockets of dense trees that are prone to fire, or stand destroying fire, but there's some buffers around that. There's some ability to halt that at a certain spot and let the fire move differently through the rest of the area. Most importantly, we're ensuring that fires can pass around the communities and neighborhoods with minimal risk. We want to be able to have fire occur into the system in such a manner that it isn't this huge impact on our lives. It isn't this huge risk to our property and the firefighters and everybody out there dealing with it. So creating a little bit more of a natural range of variation maybe doesn't get us exactly to what that used to be, but it does get us to something that is more manageable and resilient. So some of the benefits to this are that, we may have some areas that get to return to prehistoric conditions. Opportunities, things like cultural learning and whatnot provides an opportunity to return landscapes to some of these management styles and management activities that were removed 150 years ago, but we can now begin to reintroduce. Some areas are changed to provide defensible space for more recreational opportunities around communities and neighborhoods, right? So even though the historic regime may have allowed fire to come into an area more frequently, now because we have a community in there, we're going to have to change that a little bit. And ultimately, the benefit of the natural range of variation is that we build resiliency into that landscape. So with that, with those concepts in mind, listen to the rest of the projects that we have to go over here this evening, and then at the end of this, we can always use the up arrow and go back to those slides and talk about some of that stuff if that's of interest. What I want to talk about here real quick before we move into individual presentations is two important kind of views at these particular projects. So on the right-hand side here, I have all the different projects that are within the Tamarack Fire Perimeter. The Tamarack Fire Perimeter here is pretty obvious. There's this little piece in the middle here, which is an unburned area around the Markley Village communities. But you can see this kind of demonstration of all the different ownerships associated with the different projects within the area here. So there's a number of jurisdictions and a number of different land management agencies associated with this. If I change this though to look at the prescriptions associated with these different projects and what's proposed on the landscape, although the timing and specific methods may be a little different, overall the prescriptions are largely going to be consistent across the jurisdictions and ownership. And that's sort of important, not sort of important, that's very important in that we're trying to be able to manage this landscape. Now, how we apply those prescriptions gets to that finesse, that natural variation. But fundamentally here, there is a consistent approach amongst all the agencies about all these different projects, okay? So with that, I think we'll move on to our first presenter here. And we're gonna start talking about along the roadway. So the roadway is managed by Caltrans. Bob, go ahead and take it.
Thank you, Clint. Thank you, JT, for having us. It's a pleasure to be with you all tonight. Thank you for coming, and thanks to be here with all of these great, hardworking agencies. My name is Bob Heifel. I'm a Public Information Officer with Caltrans in District 10, and I'm proud to be joined with Wes Bingham, who's Caltrans Maintenance Area Superintendent for the Pine Grove Peddler Hill area, and also James Adams, Caltrans Maintenance Supervisor. Woodford's, these guys have been vested in this area, worked very hard, and are here to answer any questions you might have after a brief update. We'll go through a couple slides on Caltrans emergency response following the Tamarack fire and efforts to mitigate impact from future wildfires. So Caltrans began work right after the Tamarack fire, and the tree removal work is complete. What remains is some culvert enlargement in a few areas, and that will begin soon and is estimated to be finished this season. Next slide, please. Thank you. So immediately after the contract was approved, Caltrans initiated a director's order to repair in-kind damaged facilities and remove the threat of the hazard trees along State Route 89. The project was suspended for the winter, then resumed this spring. As I said, all the tree work has been completed. Now, this $7.4 million emergency director's order project also included repairs to deer fencing that was burned and installation of erosion and sediment control measures on slopes to prevent the loss or impairment of life, property, and essential public services. On June 21st, so just last week, the deer fence work was completed. Next slide, please. Caltrans also initiated a director's order to mitigate the potential threat of the burn scar and hydraulic flows predicted by the Burn Area Emergency Response Team from the Department of Agriculture. And this $4.4 million emergency project intends to prevent further damage to the infrastructure from the predicted debris flows identified by the BEAR team. The work in general will replace a culvert, install debris rack fencing, and place additional rock slope protection along the fills on Highway 89, contiguous with the channels to prevent the loss or impairment of life, property, or essential public services. So this emergency project began construction on June 20th of this year, and we're waiting for permits from the United States Army Corps of Engineers for 3 locations. Culvert replacement at one of the locations, excavating the channel embankment to achieve a clear slope is recommended at another location, and a metal debris rack is recommended at the 3rd location. And this project is anticipated to be completed by the end of September this year. So that's what I have. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Ron. Next, we're going to have Elliot Jones from Liberty Utilities, who's going to talk a little bit about what Liberty's been working on.
Hi everyone, my name is Elliot Jones. I'm with Liberty Utilities. I'm the Senior Manager of Wildfire Prevention here, and we unfortunately our Vegetation Manager was not able to be here tonight, but I'm going to go ahead and fill in because I was pretty familiar with the project, and certainly during the fire and everything that was going on, Liberty Utilities was very active during the fire in trying to get power restored to the town of Markleeville as well as Woodford's. And so first of all, I want to talk a little bit about just what went on during the fire, some of the activities that we took on immediately, and then I'll get into a little bit more of the projects that we've taken on since and some of the work we're still undertaking. So first of all, during the fire, as you all know, it was incredibly damaging and incredibly scary for everyone. It was Liberty's largest fire that we've experienced as far as damage goes to our infrastructure since we acquired the territory in 2011. So this was a really big deal to us as a company, as well as just the overall response from our company. So a couple of stats there. First of all, we had 6, actually it was almost 7 miles of distribution line that was destroyed, mostly along the highway corridor right here, not far from Turtle Rock Park. It was over 150 poles that we had to replace. Some of them were by helicopter based on the terrain, and a total of 22 miles of conductor had to be pulled and restrung. That's a pretty big deal for us as a utility to try to do that in short order. I believe most of that was done once we were allowed back into the fire perimeter within, I want to say 10 days, maybe probably 2 weeks by the time we had it wrapped up. And in that process, we had 125 employees working on this project. That's everyone in our company. Everyone was here working, trying to get power restored as soon as possible. We wanted to make sure that when people were back in their homes, that they would have power when they did so. During that process, the initial focus for Liberty is from a vegetation management perspective, in order to get power restored and make sure that all the new construction was going to be safe from all the dead hazard trees. We ended up falling about 5,100 hazard trees along that 6 miles of line, and had to try to ensure that we were keeping things out of water courses, and in some cases having to go back and clear that vegetation, and just essentially try to make sure that there's no other trees or dead trees that are going to fall into the lines after this event, and make sure that we're protecting those lines. So pretty big effort, and it was really wonderful to kind of be a part of the community. And we've been here for a long time, but just to see the strength and the resiliency from you all as our customers and community members here, it was really a big deal to us. So Last thing I want to note on this, to date, we're north of $9 million on both the repairs, the vegetation management work, all the labor and everything that went into it. Go to the next slide. Do I have that? Or, oh, you got it, okay. So I'll get into the some of the recovery projects that we've done to date. We've done a few different projects, some private, some government like county, and then also federal BLM and U.S. Forest Service. And starting with the BLM land, you can see, hopefully you can see the red outline. Okay, or can I walk up?
You can walk up there.
Yeah,
I can
so,
touch it, it won't bite.
so thank you. So the BLM land in the red here, and also up by the reservoir, a lot of trees had to be dropped in those areas, and we worked with BLM to go in there, get a lot of the material out where it was accessible, chip a lot of the material. In some cases, we blew it back into the right of way or spread it out along the hillside. And for all of these projects, most of the material, logs and biomass have gone to Full Circle. They're a facility in Gardnerville, if you all are familiar. They turned it into wood chip and other type of materials that can be used for landscaping and other purposes. So yeah, 17 acres of land we treated on BLM, and then in Alpine County, which is just north, the property just north here of Turtle Rock, we treated about 3 acres of land. And then also down in Shea Creek, where there was quite a bit of trees that we had to remove there, and that's a work in progress right now. We're still trying to figure out how we can access all the material that was dropped in there, and in some cases we're looking at decking locations and where we can ultimately haul that wood off to. And then finally working with Humboldt-Tiobe National Forest to treat 6 acres of land, mostly along Hot Springs Road here. You can see the green. We're still working to finalize our operating plan where we can bring equipment into the forest and how we can pull that material out with as little damage to the landscape as possible. So that's a lot of what we've done so far as treatment. Obviously a little bit more to go in what's currently planned, and we don't have a whole lot of other plans. We're really curious to be here today, and also back when there was another meeting in October about sort of the full restoration plan of all the different agencies and partnering with everyone to try to better understand what work needs to be done at the landscape level. Part of it is, when you look along the power lines where we remove trees, in some cases there's still trees on the ground that were a result of our felling operations, and immediately adjacent to that right away there's thousands and thousands of other dead trees that will eventually fall over, most likely, or be another kind of fuel source. So we're here to, actually you can go to the next slide if you want.
You got it.
We're here to sort of partner with the community and see where there may be other opportunities. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you should have talked. Sorry about that. This was just an example of the before and after Shea Creek project. One area where a lot of logs were on the ground and we were able to actually get in there and remove them. Just wanted to use that as an example of some of the work we've done, and then we'll go to the next slide here, just about Liberty being here to listen to all of our partners and all of these large landscape level owners to see where the direction of restoration is going and see where Liberty might be able to help. At this point, we've got these projects we're working on, and we've reached out from our earlier meetings about trying to learn where some more opportunities might be. But at this point, those are the projects that we have, and we do really hope to see this community restored, and we really hope to see this community thrive as it has in the past. So with that, I'm going to pass it back.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So it's a well-oiled choreography here we have worked out. You know, we met here 15 seconds before he got handed the microphone, so worked out good. We did great, actually, thank you. Really appreciate, once again, all the partners providing information on the slides and whatnot, so this has been awesome. Our next individual will be Mr. John Bell from Cal OES. He's going to tell us a little bit about the project immediately around Turtle Rock Park here and the role Cal OES has played in that.
Good evening, everyone. I'm John Bell. This is Amber Lane. We're both from the Cal OES recovery team on the debris operations unit, and we were a part of the central division here. This battle still that was asked to come into Alpine County to work on restoration or recovery work for the Tamarack fire. We're going to talk about Turtle Rock Park here, but we did also do a little bit of assistance with Grover Hot Springs and 3 additional property owners that were impacted. This was funded here by California Disaster Act Assistance, and Turtle Rock Park is, since it's a publicly owned entity, it was actually requested by the county to be added into our program. Normally we just deal with private properties, but at request of the county we included a special inclusion to include the park. And with that, initially it was going to be just the campground area, but after talking with the county about what they were interested in for their further down the line restoration projects, they asked us to include as much as possible, and so we were able to actually get included the disc golf course as well, which, as you can see, obviously covers most of the park. If you want to go to the next slide there, it just shows a little bit of metrics here. So there wasn't a ton of eligible debris that was burned on the property. Unfortunately, this building did not burn, but there were a few T-pads and a couple of outbuildings that did burn. So about 100 tons of debris was removed from that side of it. We did end up felling and removing 3,751 trees. And with that, we had about 15 to 20 personnel on site with that. Just to show some metrics, it is a long process, of course. We did come in and were able to do the debris removal here before the snow fell in December, and then unfortunately with that snowfall on the ground, it limited our access and ability to finish the assessment process for trees. So finally got tree felling going just at the end of March, and we're able to wrap that up at the end of May, and then the property was returned here just earlier this month. And then you want to go one more slide there. So something just to bring up that isn't necessarily always seen. Part of our process is the extensive assessment process that goes along with this. So that includes obviously site assessment, asbestos checks, archaeological, biological, tree, of course, the arborist tagging the trees, an RPF review, bird surveys, it goes on. So with that, we mapped and flagged off quite a few different areas to be protected, including the existing water lines that were part of the park, water courses, of course, Wilpez zones, historical relevant areas, archaeological areas. With part of our process, we have crew monitors on site every day with each crew that documents and does material tracking. And then because of the sensitivity of this park, we also had archaeological and biological monitors on site every day to ensure that our crews were respecting the local community's wishes and ensuring that we didn't impact any of the waterways along, and of course, ensuring we stayed in compliance as well. One of the big questions that tends to get asked of us is where the trees go, and the trees are in every possible way we can recycled into some additional new material. They often go to an end-use facility, is what we would call it, that does repurpose the wood. However, if it was unable to be repurposed, that ended up getting used in biomass production, and as you can also see, some of it was left in chips on site to help with some erosion control. So, Amber, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I just wanted to say good job, John. I normally do these things and I let him do it this time, because I knew you guys would all be very accepting of him, so thank you, John, and thank you for your friends.
Thanks, John. JT's going to tell us a little bit more about the park itself here and what some of the plans are.
Yeah, so, obviously you guys came here today and you saw what it looks like. It's not the Turtle Rock Park that was pre-Tamarack fire. And with that challenge comes an even greater challenge of how do we as a community re-envision what Turtle Rock Park can be moving forward for our generation, for the next generation, and onward. And so that is not just something that is decided within my office or anybody's office within the county. It comes from the ground up, and it comes from suggestions and feedback and recommendations from the community. So what I would challenge all you guys to do today is, as you leave, take a mental photo, take a real photo, come out here, sit and think about what this place can be, and let's work collaboratively to try to figure out what the next chapter is going to be. Because, we can't go back, but my favorite statement is, you can take one step forward, or you can make a 180-degree turn and take one step forward, but you're not going back. So I wish I had an answer for you today as to what the county's expectations are, what we're looking to do at Turtle Rock Park, but I think that would not really be respectful of all the community's input and all the efforts and really passion and love that you guys have for this place. So we will start the process now that Cal OES has been gracious enough to get the work done in a really quick time and turn this park back over to us so that we can start to go through the process of healing, visioning, and working collaboratively and together to make something happen and turn this thing into something that can really potentially be a new cornerstone for our community. But I strongly encourage, the Tamarack fire, albeit the worst natural disaster that I've experienced, and I guarantee you most of you, it really did codify us and bring us together as a community, and I think that this could give us another opportunity to do that as well. So with that, we're going to move more into kind of our subject matter based presentation. So this is now moving into the landscape as we start. So we're now off the roadway and now moving into some of our other partners who have been doing some great work here. So first and foremost, we have, is it Annabelle that's going to be for the Humboldt-Tehapi? She's the forester, and she's been an amazing help to me understanding what forestry even is. So Annabelle, thank you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. JT said I'm Annabelle Monty. I'm the forester for the Carson Ranger District with the Humboldt-Tehapi National Forest. Most of you have already heard my spiel about what our restoration project is going to consist of here on National Forest System land, so this will be a Cliff Notes version of that for those of you who haven't heard some of the details. And like JT and Clint both mentioned, we're all happy to answer questions if you have more in-depth things that you want to talk about. So our proposed action for what's going to be taking place on National Forest System lands, we're looking at about 3,000 acres of treatment. And that treatment is really focused around what we refer to as the WUI, or the Wildland Urban Interface. That's the Markley Village area, the area around Grover Hot Springs State Park. And essentially it's where we have reasonable access to get in and do work. Obviously there's a huge landscape here that could probably benefit from a lot of work, but reality is that we don't have access to get in there to do that work responsibly in any way. So part of the National Environmental Protection Act, NEPA, for those of you who have ever heard the term NEPA, that's what it actually stands for. Part of our NEPA project that we're working on here is that 3,000 acres focused around these really priority areas. That work is going to consist of biomass removal. I want to be very clear about that because there's some kind of gray area between biomass removal versus salvage. For those of you that aren't aware, once wood and trees burn, then at that point it would be a salvage operation. The value of those trees decreases significantly once they're burned. And once they stand for any extended period of time, that value decreases even more rapidly. And so when we get our NEPA project done and we actually start implementing, we won't be looking at implementation until next year sometime. So shorthand means that those trees have absolutely zero value. So there's no, financial gain from going out to do the biomass removal or salvage, however you'd like to refer to it. The biomass removal really refers back to what Clint brought up earlier when he was talking in his slides about fuels reduction around the community, ensuring that that landscape, when it does burn again, at whatever capacity it will, isn't as negatively affected as if we had such a huge fuel loading if we didn't do anything. Biomass removal is accomplished through mechanical thinning. We will do hand chipping as well, or mulching, if you will. We'll be hand thinning as well with hand crews, in addition to machinery, and then also prescribed fire is a part of that to actually remove that material from the landscape. Reforestation and revegetation is also a huge component of this restoration project as well. So not only reforestation is in terms of trees, actually planting seedlings as well as some aerial seeding of trees, but also revegetation in kind of more of a broader context, and seeding more of those understory components that you see naturally occurring. We've identified about 350 acres of traditional planting. That again is very focused around a lot of the high use recreation areas that are here. The Thornbrook Canyon area, around Grover's Hot Springs, things like that, where it already sees a lot of recreation use, and so we want to get trees back on the landscape as soon as possible. And then, like I said, the aerial seeding, we're looking at about 3,000 acres of aerial seeding in a multitude of areas. The aerial seeding will be utilized more in those areas where we can't necessarily get traditional planting crews up there for whatever reason. Also, part of this restoration project is going to be road and trail repair and rehabilitation. So the timeline, we are looking to have a NEPA decision completed by March of 23. So this field season, our archaeologists are out, our wildlife biologists are out. We're doing all of the environmental coordination that needs to be done to analyze the appropriate proposed actions and those impacts on the ground. And so we will have a signed decision by March of 23, which means that next season, next summer, we will be implementing. We were funded quite a large amount, in my opinion, just having worked for the agency for a long time. We were funded through the disaster relief funding to actually do a lot of this implementation. I will tell you guys right now, that's kind of an odd situation for the Forest Service. Usually we have all these projects and we can't get funding to do it. In this particular circumstance, the Tamarack fire had such a high level of focus placed on it, and Alpine County as well, that we actually received the disaster relief funding before we started our planning process. So it's a little bit the cart before the horse in this particular circumstance, but I would much rather be in this scenario than the alternative where we have this great project planned, but then we don't have the funding to implement it. So one funding issue resolved there. And then I did want to mention that we're also seeking additional funding, primarily through the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. For those of you that are familiar, the Sierra Nevada Conservancy has been a great player in this area, and they just recently opened their Wildfire Resilience Grant Program. I don't think that's the official name of it. But we are looking at that opportunity to secure even more funding to continue doing restoration and rehabilitation. So even though in the background we have this NEPA project going on and we're doing all the environmental analysis and we won't technically start the major implementation until next season, that doesn't mean that we haven't been doing anything. So completed to date, we have had 2 volunteer tree planting days, and I think we're going to go into details here in a second, but I just want to give a very public and very loud thank you to ATA and AWG for helping with those. We had an amazing turnout. It was great to be out with the community planting trees, and I really liked it. So I hope everybody who was able to attend could do that as well. Can you go back one because I don't know. Oh, it's the same thing. Okay, perfect. So I don't know, Kimra, if you want to speak to this more, or Rachel for that matter, but we had a ton of volunteers come out. I was so shocked at how many people from the community came out to help. It was a great couple of days. And as part of that, we actually ended up planting over 4,000 trees between those 2 days. And so that was a very, very exciting moment.
Cool.
Is that it?
I think that's it. I think we're on to the BLM. Awesome. Just pass that on down the line. Thank you very much, Annabelle. And we'll hear from the Watershed Group and the Trails Association again a little bit later. But next we have Paul Fusler from the BLM, who's going to talk a little bit about the work they've been doing around the Indian Creek Reservoir.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here again. I think this is my most frequently visited spot in Alpine County over the past couple months, other than the campground. So let's see what slide we're on. Okay. So, I think the most important part of this meeting is, this is really, the second meeting of many more meetings to come. We're one of the major landscape and property managers in Alpine County, and we want to be part of the solution moving forward. I think that's actually the most important thing to me, that we're part of the community, and we want to be part of those community solutions. So thank you, Clint, for getting this meeting together. So some of the treatments that we've completed so far this year is we did a 5,000 acre aerial seeding, mostly grass and brush species, really just trying to get something on the ground other than cheatgrass. Right after the fire, we did a big hazard removal in and around the campground and along the airport road. And soon, as of tomorrow, we will be floating a salvage contract for about 180 acres. Pretty small, but just to finish off removing the trees that are dead in the campground, and then along the roadway, Airport Road and around Kurtz Lake. I held off on removing all the trees during the fire in the hope that we would get a good precip year and some of those trees would make it through the winter, but sadly, most of them did not. Upcoming treatments will be a shrub and tree planting in the next couple years as soon as those are grown out. And then in contracting right now is a boundary fence around the reservoir in the southern side of Indian Creek itself. Next slide. So, looking forward in the immediate future, like next year and perhaps even this year, we're looking to restore day use at the reservoir, at the lake. I know fishing is a big part of the draw for Indian Creek and Alpine County, and we're getting a lot of pressure to open up that day use area. So I have staff working on a proposal that they're going to put in front of me and just see how we can do that in a safe manner to get people so that they can park and walk down to the lake and go fishing again. Right now you can walk in, it's not closed, but people are trying to drive in, so we just thought we'd try to make that easier for them. I don't think we're going to be able to install shade structures this summer just due to contracting issues, but we're looking to get that out on the ground just as soon as possible. It's hot. And then, the campground, that's a big question that I frequently get questions. When's the campground going to open? Well, obviously that campground's not going to open looking like the same way it did before the fire. That's for our kids. But we are looking to get the campground redesigned, working with the landscape architect to see how we can make best use of will be remaining after the hazard tree project, and then building shade, buying the biggest trees we could buy, get those in the ground. Some of the tree species we're looking to replant, be the giant sequoias if we could get the right climate zones for those in, and they grow pretty quickly. And then that campground redesign is dependent on funding. Campgrounds are expensive when you build them to last. So we are looking for funding for that and funding sources for that. And I'm confident we'll find them. Just a couple of things of note. We did get some extra money with bill funding, with the infrastructure bill. And that money carries over into outlying years, so we will be looking on how to best use that. And I would really like to use it in a collaborative process with other federal agencies and state and local folks. And then just a comment on the Turtle Rock area that we just saw JT mention. I think we surround the park on two sides, so we'd like to be part of that conversation. How can you make best use of BLM lands that are adjacent to that park in your future planning efforts? And really most importantly for me is your questions after the meeting or whenever you want to ask them. I'm here, and my manager Kim Dow, new BLM field manager for us, is here as well, so we're happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Cool, thank you very much, Paul. All right, so another big part of the landscape here is the privately owned lands that are sort of in between the community and the out there between there and the public lands of the Forest Service, the BLM. Obviously, if you've been around the Mark Louisville area, you've seen that a lot of the private lands have already started restoration activities. And in some cases, the private lands were under restoration or under some sort of grant program to do some forest health improvement already prior to the fire. The fire has either changed or sped up those particular activities. Two of the biggest that you likely have seen or have been impacted by is the one in Pleasant Valley and the one that's referred to as Storm Crow up there on the hill above Markleyville. And the prescriptions are based on a removal of biomass and then basically some mastication and cleanup and then some reforestation. So to talk about these two locations, we have a couple of folks here this evening. Mr. Matt Setti will talk about the Storm Crow and some of the other private land areas there. So Matt, you want to come on up?
I carry my chainsaw while stiff. My company's called Nevada Environmental Consulting, and I'm the principal biologist, hydrologist there. My partner in this restoration design has been John Pickett, which is a registered professional forester. I always forget your company's name, but so John and I have put these prescriptions together, and what we ended up doing is I originally had the Storm Crow property, which is an 800-acre parcel immediately adjacent to town. We got underway with that property, and as my team was seeking funding on behalf of the owner, we identified an opportunity with the Farm Service Agency under the Emergency Forest Restoration Program. The work that's currently being conducted also, and I believe Don coming up, in Tamarack is another one that's eligible for that type of funding. So what we were able to do is essentially bridge the gap between the Farm Service agencies, which doesn't have their own technical resources, and infill where the federal agencies were short-staffed. A lot of, if you happen to be one of our 16 people that received 75%, you owe a lot of it to Stephanie Sam Sears on our staff. Her and Betty Hodick at the Farm Service Agency put these together. In total, because we designed each project of the 3,600 acre projects to the 25, we designed it around the 25% that the landowner could afford to do. Each one is a little bit different. So the one, we have about 430 acres on the ground right now at Storm Crow. That prescription was everything below 16 inches, got blown to chip. We seeded that in last fall. We will do another bunch of seeding in there. So far, we've planted a little over about 5,000 trees on that property. In general, our properties are getting a 12 species native mix, aerial seeded, vegetation removal. And by this time, all of the remaining properties will have the biomass generally stay on the property or we'll burn it. And we have about 150 trees per acre. It varies with terrain, obviously, of 4 different conifer species that'll go back in there. Our planting, in total, I think I have financial commitments with nurseries at about 375,000 trees that we'll plant over the next 3 years. So these are pretty substantial efforts that we're undertaking on this. And then what you'll also see is if you're looking up there and you think we're just making wood, I had John's guys with CTL Forestry as my subcontractor. I had them leave me about 30,000 yards of chip, and that's for us to rebroadcast. We have a great big chip gun and we'll blow that all over the side of the mountain. As I said before in some of our things, I don't look at these chips as erosion control. This is restoration of these forests on the arid lowlands on the eastern side of the mountains is a soil moisture game. And so our reintroduction of a lot of this wood mass into the systems is really for the preservation of soil moisture and bridging that gap between the time that we get enough moisture post snow and it gets too hot to grow. So that's why you're seeing areas that we are chipping with whole-size chippers, with excavators with chipper heads on them, all tools on deck. So.
Cool, thank you, Matt. We talked a little bit about the Pleasant Valley project going on. Don Hittmiller, who's done some work on that, is going to address that briefly. I don't know what it is about these LTOs and their thongs, but that's a heck of a
It's a great booth. We're talking
right,
about.
exactly.
So Pleasant Valley, we'll go over real quickly over to East Side is when we first started in 2021 after the fire. And the intensity on the east side was not that bad. So we had some tree survivability. The midsection where Raymond Creek comes through right here, we thought we were gonna have some good survivability, but it's about 95% tree mortality rate. All of this has been logged already. We're logging now up here. This is where the Crown Fire came through, so it's a temperature gradient gig. So when it went Crown Fire is basically 1,000 to 3,000 degree heat wave goes out in front and cooks everything. And so the tree mortality rate here is horrible, it's 99%. We will be done in 2 months. There'll be no more logging trucks coming out. And that's pretty much the summation of it. But basically, the midsection did pretty well because of the creek and because of the metal. And this section over here, because we got a big metal over here, it also altered the fire. But the bottom line is the heat wave came down here and went up that direction. And John was actually out, I brought John out there with Jeff Holland post the fire to get their interpretation. John nailed it right away. It's called needle freeze. And but some of the trees that we were hoping gonna make it, they're not gonna make it. In this section. This area here, we have some good tree viability. And so it's green, And it's amazing with the brush all burnt and the tree removal that had to be done, the grasses, even where they're not irrigated, they're up to here because they're getting all the moisture. And a lot of the trees in this area that were questionable, and I thought not very likely, we're seeing buds come up. We're seeing viability there. So the valley is not as bad as what we thought it was gonna be. So logging trucks will be done in 2 more months. So no more logging trucks.
All right, awesome, thank you, Don. So to talk a little bit more about what's going on with additional private lands from the county's perspective, these are the 2 areas that you have got the most visibility and see the most work going on, but there's more in the pipe. To talk a little bit more about that, JT is going to tell us about the county, state, and private forestry grant.
Yeah, thanks, Clint, and a big thanks to Matt Setti, Don Hittenmiller, John Pickett for the work that they're doing in the community, their expertise. I mean, it's great to have that skill set right here in Alpine County. So, this is an amazing opportunity for us. I know some of you guys have heard about this. This is the Alpine County State and Private Forestry Grant. So this grant, we were notified by the U.S. Forest Service through their State and Private Forestry Division that Alpine County could apply for and potentially receive $1.8 million in funds. That communication came out in basically the end of December, in which we were successful in filing an application, identifying and showing damage on some of the private lands that were affected by the fire, and securing the $1.8 million in funds for the Tamarack fire disaster recovery. Now, funds are designated specifically, and this is the best part, to assist private landowners who have suffered damage from the Tamarack fire. And there's no minimum parcel size, but the landowner must be able to demonstrate damage by the fire. That damage assessment will come from a registered professional forester who will be able to make that assessment. The treatment prescriptions, much like what you guys have seen and heard from today, will be similar to those already in place on other private and public parcels to achieve the same end state. One thing to keep in mind is I know a lot of you folks who have already had some of this recovery work happen on your properties may have received NRCS funding, Farm Services Agency funding. That doesn't preclude you from being able to secure funding from a state and private forestry grant on your property. Now, what it does do is it creates some real, important kind of separations between utilizing these federal dollars and utilizing them separate from one another, so you can't, double dip with federal funds. So as we kind of move into the second portion of the actual distribution and application process for this recovery funding, it'll be very important that we're able to define where those lines exist so that we don't get anybody in trouble as we move through the recovery process. Go ahead and hit the next slide, Clint. So just a quick timeline of where we're at. You know, we were kind of in the same awesome challenge that Annabelle and her team were in, is that we received funds, and these funds were so new through this division, through this recovery process, that we kind of had to back into the process. And so that's why you've seen a little bit of a delay. We're basically kind of writing the program as we go. So the Board of Supervisors recently approved an RFP for grant administration at the June 21st meeting, and that's for a registered professional forester. That allocation for the RFP is $250,000. The actual term of the grant, we have until 2025 to expend the $1.8 million in funding. Now keep in mind that $250,000 going for professional forestry work doesn't go far. And so what we want to make sure that the public knows is that that is specifically for a small amount of grant administration. But as far as writing prescriptions, as far as doing CEQA analysis, as far as going out for additional RFPs or securing any additional outward communication to the community, that is a function of the grant that can also be utilized through that professional forester. Once the administrator is hired, we're looking for that to be probably not mid-July. We're now looking a little bit more towards early August. County will begin an application process. And that application process, we're trying to make it as streamlined as possible so that anybody who's had an effect of the Tamarack fire on your property can submit an application for review by the county and that professional forester to make a judgment on whether or not you qualify for the grant guidelines to actually have the work be conducted. So that could entail a site analysis, it could entail a narrative, but we're trying to really kind of distill that down to make it as simple as possible, but ensuring that we can get the information that's necessary to be making those calls. Applications will be reviewed, parcels selected for funding in August and September. Timelines, of course, are subject to change based on unforeseen challenges. And then we also want to make the caveat that, you know, it's going to take time for us to ensure that our review in each one of these projects, I believe, will have to go through the CEQA process. So that is another thing, because we're utilizing a grant, and luckily we won't have to go through NEPA and CEQA through state and private forestry, just CEQA, but that will be a hurdle that we will need to overcome as we process through the grant administration. And this is also very important that we have a professional forester to be making these decisions and not JT Economic Development Director who pushes papers and writes emails. So, you know, I know that this has been kind of an arduous process, a long process, and of course, you know, myself as well as anybody else that's doing this work, we want to do it as fast and expeditious as possible. But the most important part is we need to expend these funds, and we will be audited on these funds and how we expend them. So we want to make sure that, one, we don't get a landowner in hot water, we don't get the county in hot water, and the goal is that we're able to potentially leverage these funds for additional funding for more private forestry work. But you know, this would not be possible without the collaboration with the U.S. Forest Service and Brian Hansen coming to us with this opportunity and working with us hand in hand as we put in our application. And so I do have to thank them for that I think it's $1.815 million. So that is it for now, but of course, if any questions are generated at the end of this presentation, I'm happy to answer those as well.
Cool, thank you, JT. Well, at the end of our landscape is the jewel of the county here is the California State Park Grover's Hot Springs. So Don Cranfield? Daniel Cranfield? Wow, sorry about that. He is going to give us a little bit of an update on what State Park is doing.
Yes, and thanks for having me. My name is Dan Canfield, Sierra District Superintendent of State Parks. Growing up, I got Campbell, Cranfield, Caulfield, Cantfield, Coswell, Cartwell. I mean, never get my name right. So I started, when I say what my last name was, like I'm making a car rental reservation, I'd say it's Canfield, like a Coke can in a field. And that seemed to do it. So Dan Canfield. I'm also, I'll apologize in advance, I'm filling in for my resource specialists. My forester decided to take a vacation this week. I don't know who approved that. And my resource specialist, Courtney Rowe, who's our on-the-ground, boots-on-the-ground person doing a lot of our restoration work, has been called over to western Nevada County for a wildfire near South Eagle River. She's also one of our quick action. They have a great abbreviation for them. READS are they're the folks that go in right after a fire and protect the resources. So you'll have to bear with me doing my presentation, and I'll do my best to answer any questions later. The Sierra District is state parks covers 6 counties and 17 parks. Of course, I'm here talking about Grover Hot Springs State Park, the greatest state park in Alpine County. Grover was burnt over by Tamarack fire, causing a lot of impacts like we've been hearing about on our surrounding lands. It makes a lot of sense. We did impact our facilities, several buildings, structures, a lot of our resources were impacted, and hazard trees was kind of our first goal when we got to it, was it was safe to get back into the park after the fire had moved on. Hazard tree assessment began, and ultimately 600, give or take, 600 hazard trees were identified and have been felled and mulched and chucked off and burnt and all the great stuff that we've been hearing about. Also, working with Cal OES, a lot of our hazmat work where we had burnt out buildings has been cleaned up. So the bullet point here says, which I didn't review before the meeting, says hazard tree removal and debris cleanup are ongoing. I would say near completion. And also all the public use areas in the park, which is where we started first, have been taken care of. So that was a huge lift from CAL FIRE, CCC, my staff, and all of our partners to get in there and get a handle on the hazard tree removal. Also, we had a lot of burnt up hillsides at Grover. And so as soon as the rains came, we got a lot of sediment flow down into the park. And so a lot of energy has been spent on mitigating impacts of that debris flow coming down off the hillsides, and that's going to be ongoing for some time as we hear from other landowners. Going to work with the Alpine Watershed Group on long-term monitoring, and that would be a great thing for Courtney, my resource ecologist, to fill in any blanks, but she's not here. Our park infrastructure is hit pretty hard. And I mentioned facilities, housing. A lot of our utility systems are still kind of limping along. And so limping along is kind of how I kind of describe how our park operation is currently. But we are open. We opened up in May. Once we were able to safely say, check the box, no trees are going to fall on anybody. That was check the box. We have enough water to flush the toilets. All right, check the box. We got enough employees that either lived locally or were able to camp or spike out on our properties enough to open to day use in early May, which is wonderful because I remember it was snowing. And what a great treat it was to come back to Grover Hot Springs, reopening day use, and it snowed in May, so that was pretty cool. I guess for you local folks, it's probably not so special, but for me, it was really cool. And then, also, fishing is open. Check your fishing regulations. But most recently, within the last couple of weeks, local staff were able to open up one of our campground loops. So it's getting more exciting. Day use is back. The campground is creeping back to life. Again, the campground operation is really limited on our infrastructure. We don't want to bring in a lot of folks and not be able to have them flush toilets, etc. But that process is, every day I would say, things are getting better, facility-wise, infrastructure-wise, staffing-wise. So it's definitely a positive trajectory, and I hope park visitors can see that. I've been to the park several times over the last few weeks, and I've been several times prior to the fire. And I always describe Grover as a postcard, and that's how I tell people that want to come in. Oh, it's beautiful, it's like a postcard. It's kind of looking like a postcard again. So it's resilient. We heard about resilient. The property is kind of really coming back to, it's a sight to behold. We have a trail system back in place where you can safely hike around the loop. You can also access the neighboring Forest Service lands and do a more involved hike if you like. Okay, I mentioned our facilities. We got hit hard with facilities, and of course those are the hardest things besides trees to build back or grow back. So that's going to be some long-term fixes that as a couple other presenters have mentioned, this kind of weird thing with this crisis where funding really came quick, and I'm not sure what was behind that, but we didn't have to ask twice for stuff, which is refreshing. As Annabelle mentioned, being a long-term Forest Service employee, I'm a long-term Parks employee. There's been a lot of lean years. But in this instance, I would say people at headquarters stepped up, and whomever else was involved in that, I applaud them, because it was never a, how much is that? Or what's that gonna take? It was do whatever it needs to do to heal that park and get it reopened. So that was exciting and scary at the same time. So I mentioned we have a lot of long-term fixes that we're working on. Buildings. We lost a lot of our housing, which we depend upon to house our employees, because the state doesn't pay them enough to live anywhere else, unfortunately, in kind of our current economic climate. So without that staff housing, it really constrains on how much we can operate the park, how many bathrooms we can clean. And so that's going to be a big fix. Again, I'm getting great support on funding. I don't see funding being a problem. It's just it's not easy rebuilding buildings on state parks. But we're going to be doing that, but we're not losing, when we're working on these long-term fixes, we're not losing sight of short-term solutions. And if I did lose sight of short-term solutions, my local staff would remind me, they'd probably clock me over the head, because they're the folks that are in the grocery stores and talking with you folks every day about what's happening in the park. And so I'm very happy that my local staff has that commitment, and I would say that a lot of their drive is behind the benefits that we see with the park reopening recently. And so my hat's off to them, and I respect that immensely. The heart they had to get that park reopened was impressive. And I just tried to do my best not to get in the way, which is sometimes hard. I did have a last slide with a picture. With this one, so Rich Adams is our forester. Someone approved him having a week before 4th of July off on vacation. I don't know who approved that. But he did say, hey, you're going to that meeting in Markleyville. I added this picture, and he says to me, you know, without CAL FIRE and the Seas and all of our partners, we wouldn't be in this good position. And one more thing, he said, if we didn't have such a mild winter, because the crews got in there, built the piles, did the chipping and the logging and the thinning, and Rich was expecting there to be a normal snowpack, which would have really slowed our ability to burn those piles. Mother Nature either came through or didn't come through, depending on your perspective, but we had a mild winter and early spring, which allowed us to get those piles burned. So if you go into Grover Hot Springs today, which I encourage you to do, if you walk in, there's no fee, you will see, I hope, a postcard. And just know that we are working to, obviously the pool complex at Grover Hot Springs State Park is a very popular local attraction. And that's one of those short-term solutions at the same time as a long-term fix. If you've been to the pool complex in the last couple of years, it's starting to get a little worn out. And so we're looking at a short-term solution so the pool is reopened as soon as possible, but a long-term fix to really make it a worthy destination for Alpine County. So we're doing both at the same time, which is a little challenging, but that was the commitment again the local staff are going to demand, is that we do what we can to get it open as soon as possible, while at the same time we plan for that facelift for that next 20, 30 years for the pool. That'll be the next big one. I'm hopeful that we have a pool operation this summer. The challenge is there's the hot pool and there's the cold pool. In the summer, the hot pool doesn't really work without the cold pool. So those are all the issues that we're working through. But I'm confident that the same energy and devotion from the local staff and our partners that got Grover Hot Springs State Park real, but in what I would call a remarkable time frame, is going to be pushing all of us to get that pool open as well. So stay with us, stay tuned, and thank you for coming this evening.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Dan, the Coke can in a field. I'll never forget that one again. Thank you. Okay, so we've heard a lot about all the different restoration projects that are going on. And we've almost bored some of you to sleep. I see it. It's coming. We should have handed out blankets and pillows at the door. But we just got a few things to march through here first. So we still have some mitigation projects to work on. There's some holes here in this burned area that still indicate some threats within the community. We have unburned areas within the fire perimeter, as well as some unburned areas, some community right next to the fire that still need some assessment. Our wildfire mitigation projects that are still currently in place are informed by the county wildfire mitigation plan that was completed a couple of years ago, and some of the other groups and the Alpine Fire Safe Council have picked these projects up and gotten some of them funded, and we'll be moving on with them. So with that, Chris, go ahead and tell us a little bit about those.
Thank you, Clint. First, I want to thank the county and Clint Celio for the invitation to the Alpine Fire Safe Council. Projects that you see here are within the grant that we had just succeeded in being awarded. For some reason, the Alpine Fire Safe Council becomes the guinea pig for new types of grants, orientation of grants, and how we are able to make these grants work. For instance, when we were able to work on the Washoe Tribe allotment land in Woodfords, we found out that NEPA had to be completed, and there was no vehicle at the time through CAL FIRE for CAL FIRE to recognize NEPA, because CAL FIRE only recognized CEQA. So again, the Fire Safe Council was the guinea pig. They had to, the state Senate had to write a Senate bill to cross over NEPA to CEQA, and then we were able to proceed with the project, and thankfully. In this case, in December, November of last year, I got a phone call from the Amador El Dorado unit, and they said, would you like to have $588,000? And trust me, I wasn't going to turn it down. But I asked, what's that mean? We have what's called a direct grant, and you're the first one out of the chute with the opportunity for a direct grant. I said, what does that mean? And they said, we are going to have to walk through this with you because we don't really know yet how these direct grants work. Well, the Fire Safe Council is a recipient of a direct award grant. These are 6 of the projects that we are going to work on, and I'm going to go through them quickly. There is one more that has to be added to this group that was added later, and that is a CEQA study on the Upper Manzanita Road project area, one that Mr. Celio started years ago with the Fire Safe Council and pursued projects there. It's now overgrown again, and the Forest Service, I've asked them years on end, what's the priority? And Annabelle says, Upper Manzanita Road. So we are going to get a CEQA study done. The purpose of the CEQA study is when we get more money, we will pursue Upper Manzanita Road for fuels mitigation. The other project is the Fire Safe Council is obligated funds from what's called Secure Rural Schools. Title III, the Board of Supervisors approves a distribution of funds to organizations, including the Fire Safe Council, and we have accumulated enough money from these Title III funds. We are within weeks of starting a project on Monroe Ranch Road with the opportunity to work with the property owner and pursue about 200 feet back from the houses that face Highway 89. So that's the 7th, 8th project. Hot Springs Road is the first one. Next slide. And this is a depiction of what we turned in to submitted to CAL FIRE as the grant project. It actually comes clear up here to just below Raymond View. It starts at the Storm Crow property beginning on the east end and stops at the Forest Service sign and the Forest Service boundary. We have achieved over 99% right of entry authorizations from the property owners to begin work. I can't diminish this enough. Without John Pickett, I wouldn't be here talking to you about this today. I've learned a lot from the man, and Matt also. It's been a phenomenal education as to how these things actually evolve and what you do and what you don't do. So thank you. This project will affect traffic through the Hot Springs Road corridor. We are going to remove the envelope of the trees that cover Hot Springs Road on both sides of the road in the county right of way. And thank you to the county also for being one of the contributors and partners in this. The piece that isn't shown is right here is the fire station. The county has agreed to include the fire behind the fire station, which is also well overgrown and contributes to another wildland fire. All of this work on Hot Springs Road is in the green. We're not touching anything that was burned. Because that was originally I was told when I applied for the grant, you can't treat any burned area. So I didn't. Subsequently, later, CAL FIRE said, oh, you can treat some of the burned area, but that's okay. Alpine Village, or no, Shade Creek. 2 years ago, we completed a project from the center of Shade Creek, Loop B, all the way to the end of Loop C. It was well received by the majority of the residents, and from what I understand, I evacuated. I don't know this firsthand, but the fire chief and the Zephyr crew came together and sent the Fire Safe Council a letter and thanked us for the work that we did in the common areas along Shade Creek Road. It gave them, the firefighters, the opportunity to get in with more equipment and manpower to be able to save those cabins. So the project now is phase 2. We're going to go from the center line of Shade Creek Road to the east entrance of Shade Creek. Same common area, both sides of the road, 20, 30 feet. We are using the common area because we can get a signature from the Shade Creek Homeowners Association to work in those property areas. The majority of it is hazard trees that will be removed. Hawkside Court is also STPUD. This one is when I first started with this thing, the Fire Safe Council, I met a very nice man who's instructed me quite a bit. His name is Tom Tinsley. He's since retired from CAL FIRE. And he infused in me a word called mosaic. And I didn't know what that meant when I first started. I knew what the term meant, but I didn't know what it meant with fuels reduction. He says you start tying these projects together to help us, CAL FIRE, and your fire department, so that they have more of an opportunity to save homes. So, the Washoe Tribe allotment land in Woodford's is kind of a pie-shaped piece of property. It's bounded by Diamond Valley Road and Highway 89. In there is the fire department and the road crew, which gives them the opportunity to get out. That's our anchor point. From there, we have had a very conducive relationship with Hawkside Court. We have rights of entry with all of the Hawkside Court property owners and STPUD. And hopefully this coming year, we're going to be able to start fuels work after we have a community meeting with both Alpine Village and Hawkside Court and explain to them what the project is and how it will benefit everybody. On the STPUD property, we are going to move the fuels back from the property line 200 feet onto STPUD property, and they are right there with us to want to get it done because they're concerned. It will also remove some dead trees in the same vicinity. Rancho Mesa Vista. This is on the south side of Sunrise Trail. It was brought to the Fire Safe Council from one of the Fire Safe Council members that lives on Sunrise Trail. The good part about it is most of the properties have been sold, but there's only 2 houses that have been built in the project area. Give us a lot easier access after we talk to the property owners about getting equipment in there to remove the fuels back from the property line, which belongs to the BIA on the south side, to help save those properties and the properties in Mesa Vista. Mesa Vista Tribal is owned by the Washoe Tribe members. Actually, it's owned by the Washoe tribe. It's 2 parcels. One that is, comes right off of Immigrant Trail. The other one's up behind the houses on California Street. And we're gonna move the brush back by machine 200 feet from the common property line to protect those houses. We will have a community meeting with the property owners. Alpine Village is a parcel that is right next to Barber Road that we treated 2 years ago with Title III money. We moved the fuels back from Barber Road. It was actually helpful to the firefighters that protected Alpine Village. So this time, we are gonna complete the project area in Alpine Village out to the creek that comes down next to the highway. That will complete the Alpine Village area along with the STPUD property and provide a buffer all the way around those 2 communities. The Fire Safe Council achieves its projects from you. We meet bi-monthly. We look forward to property owners coming to us and telling us, we've got this project that you might be interested, or it comes from within Fire Safe Council members. We vet each project, go out and look at them. I bring back the Fire Safe Council pictures, and they make a decision based upon what their criteria is, our criteria is, how does it benefit the inhabited residents around within the mitigated area. So we would encourage you, as residents of Alpine County, I also, to bring projects to us, and we'd be happy to look at them and make a determination when we have more money to be able to pursue these projects. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you, Chris. So a lot of these projects don't get done, as you've already heard from many of the collaborators here today, without the help of some of the other folks, well, some of the other collaborators. So next up is CAL FIRE. Brian Newman from CAL FIRE is going to just give us a little bit of an overview about what they're doing to help out with all of these projects and on both private, state lands here.
All right, good evening. My name is Brian Newman. I'm the Assistant Chief with CAL FIRE in the Amador El Dorado unit. I'm the East Division Operations Chief. So that's Lake Tahoe Basin and Alpine County is my area of responsibility. So like you saw on some of the other slides here, really what we're doing is we're helping different agencies and different landowners to be able to help mitigate not only the Tamarack fire elements, but also ahead of incidents going on and different kind of incidents and things that we would be dealing with. So some of the mitigation projects that you saw in there with the state parks, Rich Adams came to me and asked if we would be able to commit our crews to be able to help with that, and we were very gracious and very happy to do that. We have last April we started a new crew program that was permanently funded through the governor's budget last year that allowed for us to have 2 Type 1 fire crews out of Lake Tahoe, CAL FIRE fire crews, which we'd never had before. And obviously the timing was pretty epic considering all the between the Tamarack and the Caldor fire that we had last year. But as part of that crew is funded and it's staffed with CAL FIRE captains and CAL FIRE leadership, but it has the 3C, the California Conservation Corps crew members, as the actual fire crew members in there. And it's really good workforce development, and it's a really good cooperative agreement between us and the 3Cs. And what it's really led to is the ability to do these kind of work. And in Grover Hot Springs, you heard we took down almost 700 trees directly damaged by the Tamarack fire. And it was a great opportunity for us to help give back to the community here. And really, our crew spent the vast majority of the winter here in Alpine County doing that. We helped plant some trees in the Markleeville Water District area. And then we've been working with STPUD to help improve the waterways and some restoration from the Tamarack along the area just on the perimeter of the Tamarack as well. So it's been really good for us to be part of the community here. I know in the past CAL FIRE hasn't always had a huge footprint here in the county, but we've been trying to be more prevalent and more present here in the county in a number of ways. It is a unique situation for us here just because of the way that the land is split up in regards to protection and how the state laws and agreements are set up. So one of the other things that we do quite a bit of is what we call 4291 or defensible space inspections. Over the course of the last 3 years, we've inspected almost 100% of the homes within Alpine County. And you know, that's a huge thing for us, and it's not just that we were able to do it, it's really that the community has taken that serious. And if you look at the map, and maybe Clint can scroll to it for the area of Markley Village and Shade Creek, and Chris had mentioned it, but one of the reasons that donut hole exists there in the middle of the fire is because of the community's seriousness that they've taken for defensible space and home hardening on the recommendations of these defensible space inspections that we've done. Really allowed our crews to get in there and to be able to save homes and to engage the fire and do what we needed to do in that area specifically. And we would not have been able to do that had it not been for you as a community to take that serious and take those recommendations and allow us to do the job that we needed to do. So you should applaud yourselves for that, because that is a huge accomplishment for this county. So one of the other things we do is provide grant opportunities. As mentioned, Chris said our main forester, Tom Tinsley, called him up and said, hey, I'm gonna give you $500,000. And he said, well, how do I do that? So Tom and I had a conversation, and Chris and I talked quite a bit about it as well. And that's one of the things, as part of my job, is to really make the pitch of why we need to provide grant money and opportunities to Alpine County. And I think it speaks for itself with the fire history between the Acorn Fire, the Washington Fire, and obviously now the Tamarack Fire. And the work that the Fire Safe Council does, with some guidance from ourselves and from all the other local cooperators, to really push that forward. And so really it makes it easy for me to make the sell to have the Fire Safe Council do the work that they've been doing, and they've been very successful at that. And so, continuing to push and support the Fire Safe Councils and all the other, between the ABC and the Watershed Group, being able to really push that forward, it makes that sell much easier to keep that grant money flowing into the county. One of the other things that we work with is the Firewise communities. Kirkwood just attained its Firewise status very recently, and that's one of the things we work with them to be able to put them on the path to do that. And that's a pretty big award. What it does is it actually will reduce your homeowner's insurance, and it really puts a stamp on that community to say that you're taking defensible space serious and home hardening serious. And so we kind of help guide that along and really kind of help get that community where it needs to be in regards to some Firewise, the Firewise status of that. So we are not a landowner. CAL FIRE is not a landowner in anywhere really in the state, with a few minor exceptions. Our primary protection area is the private lands, but we also spend a lot of time just really helping those private lands, whether it's a single landowner, a large landowner, state, federal, or local, really kind of work together in this big collaborative effort that we're doing. And so we will continue to do that here in Alpine County. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you so very much, Don. Another entity that has done a tremendous amount of work in terms of restoration relative to the Tamarack Fire, Smartville Water Company. Their water source is dependent upon the Mustard Jarvis watershed there, and so they've been doing a lot of work in that regard. So Mary, come up and tell us a little bit.
Thank you. So if you live in Markleyville or Markley Village, you get the majority of your water from the Musser and Jarvis watershed.
And this is Mary Young, president of the Markleyville Water Company.
I didn't introduce myself, yes.
Not to be confused with marrying a cocaine in the field.
Okay, so anyway, this is where you get your water, and it was severely burned in the Tamarack Fire. So we installed, with volunteers in the CCC, wattles, and we did planting of grass as soon as we possibly could, which was last fall. And the seeds have done well. We got in there early spring, thinking more long-term stabilization, and planted 3,000 trees with the help of the Conservation Corps and CAL FIRE. The pines are doing well, all the pine species, we've been looking at them, they're doing well. The cedars maybe have a 50% mortality so far. We had that large rainfall event last fall, and that did cause sediment flow and debris flow at our intake, and it had an upset for us for a while, and we asked all you guys to conserve water, and I believe you did during that time. We made it through on wells for a while until the repairs could be made. Since then, we made some changes to our intake, And that decreases the amount of sediment going down the pipe, and it improves the quality of our water. So our issue really is with the sediment that comes down because there's very little vegetation in the area. It's not really an issue with the ash, and I think you guys probably see that too. Like right during the rain, you see the ash in the water. At that point, we don't use the water, but then after that, the sediment, the DG and sand continue to flow, and that kind of gums up our system. And that is our challenge that we're working operationally to get through. But I just want to say that before and after the fire, our water quality has always met all state standards. We have never had a problem with our treated drinking water. Next slide, please. So if you helped us plant, this is the result. We're getting some really good grass growth in the lower watershed that we're very pleased with. We continue every day to learn how the watershed changes in the different seasons with the different kind of rainfall, how it was in the winter. We're not quite sure how we're going to do this summer. But if you remember, after the fire, we had no outdoor water use. But at this time, we do still allow watering 3 days a week. We don't know the low flow in the creek this summer, if we'll be able to continue to do that, but we're going to do it for as long as we can. And we might tighten things up a little bit. If we encounter larger intense rainfall events, we may also ask for conservation during that time because of sediment flow. And just as noted on here, we'd really like to think we're in a weird position because we're a private company and our watershed is on National Forest lands. So we don't qualify for anything, it seems like, in the way of grants. So we put this together through the Tamarack Fire Recovery Fund. And they paid for the seeds. Richard and Susan Birchall made a donation to us, and that funded the CCC crews coming out. The U.S. Forest Service donated the trees, and they really expedited approval of this work. I mean, we were doing this work last fall, earlier than anybody else. Alpine Watershed Group really organized our volunteer days, and my husband, Bill Young, he really organized the planning efforts for the restoration of this watershed. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you very much. And there's just so many more collaborators who continue to help out and get these projects going on the ground, coordinating volunteers, coordinating capacity within the community. So Kimra McAfee from the Alpine Watershed Group is going to talk a little bit.
Hi, we're your local watershed group, and so as soon as the fire happened, I started trying to procure resources so we could say yes when partnership opportunities arose. And so you've heard our name a couple of times throughout the night. If it's monitoring, if it's restoration, if it's community outreach and education, those are all things we can bring to the table. Our focus is watershed health improvement. In the past, we've kind of looked to Alpine Biomass Collaborative and the Fire Safe Council, but what Tamarack Fire has taught us is we need to be able to be a partner and help leverage resources anywhere we can. And so we are seeking ways to build our capacity and to build the county's capacity, not just for recovering from the Tamarack fire, but to build that resilient forest. We are doing a wide variety of monitoring work, water quality, vegetation, monitoring those seeds, monitoring the trees that have been planted, monitoring invasives from the work done at Grover, where there was either the dozer lines or hand lines, making sure that the remedies that were done right after the fire aren't impacting with an influx of invasive plants. We will continue to coordinate volunteers for the little projects, hopefully for bigger projects. Come out on Creek Day, September 17th. We don't know what we'll be doing yet, but you will be able to help with fire recovery. And I'm just looking forward to working with Clint. I don't know that he really fully explained the fire coordinator, but I want to say Alpine County is so lucky to have a fire coordinator because that's been the missing piece in all of our organizations coming together, and now Watershed Group has a little pressure taken off of us because of you for a little while.
Thank you very much. And the best auctioneer's vote for today's favorite slide. So, Andy, see if you can follow that up with the Alpine Trails Association. Just give us the little 1-2 on all the efforts that you've made here and helping restore the trails and doing some more planting out there.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Lovell with the Alpine Trails Association. If you're not familiar with us, we're an all-volunteer group here in Alpine County. We get volunteers, though, from Gardnerville, Tahoe, that come to Alpine County to help us with trail building, usually just trail building and maintenance, but we broadened our scope a little bit over the last year to be able to help with some of these restoration projects in the area. One of the things we did here with a private landowner right behind Turtle Rock Park is this top picture here. We have someone bought land back here, the sole purpose to be able to restore it after the fire. I mean, how great is that, right? So she called the Alpine Watershed Group and the ATA, and I think Friends of Hope Valley, and we got some volunteers together. And we got out there and started doing work with this group that she had hired to build these structures to hold back water flow on Millbury Creek as it comes down. And we probably did about 30 of those structures. Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. 30 small ones. Yeah, and put debris in there to allow the water to come down, spread out, slow it down so it doesn't come down through Markleyville raging like we had maybe been warned last year. At least we're hoping that'll help mitigate that problem. So that's just one of the things that we've done on the side to help with restoration. Our other focus has been on, with the restoration part, is on planting trees. You probably heard we worked with the Alpine Watershed Group, and thanks to Annabelle, we had a lot of extra trees to work with. We continued to plant trees all the way up Thornburg Canyon, 2 miles up Thornburg Canyon Trail. And every week that we go out there, we've been watering. So not just the area right by the trailhead that was done during the original 2 days of planting, but all the way up, wherever we found moisture, where even on ridge lines where we could just get trees to start growing and have the pine cones fall off the ridge line and hopefully seed new trees in the future. We're really focused on those areas. So part of the Thornburg Canyon Trail 2, you can see we had 100% tree mortality. We haven't found a live tree from the Thornburg Canyon Trailhead to 2.25 miles in where it finally crosses Back Creek. So it's terrible to look at around the trees, but the wildflowers are coming in. It's beautiful. We've got new trees in the ground, and it gave us some great opportunities for trail restoration. This area right here used to be a 2-foot deep trough that was bounded on one side by a steep slope and the other side a big ridge line, and the water would just always go down that trough. There was no way of us being able to hack all that huckleberry oak and manzanita out of the way. Well, guess what? The fire took care of it for us. So we've been able to go in and sell roots to deal with, but get rid of the roots, knock that berm down, and re-bench the trail and get it to a point where we're gonna have good water flow sheeting off of the trails instead of running down them. So that's been our big project this spring, is taking care of those issues on the Thornburg Canyon Trail. Fortunately, the Forest Service was able to go in last year and remove a lot of the dead trees, the hazard trees around the trail. So we were able to do our work pretty easily. We also take care of the Charity Valley Trail and the Burnside Lake Trail. We haven't gotten to them yet. We will. We also take care of the 8-mile loop out at Indian Creek Reservoir, and we built the interpretive loop, which burned. But we do have one of our employees, who I won't name by name because he works a little rogue, but we love him. And he's done a lot of great work out there, and he's actually gotten those trails back to a point where they can be taken and you can find your way around them. And we'll continue to work on top of what he's done to restore that whole 8-mile loop over time with the help of Paul and Arthur out there at the BLM. So part of the best news about this, we haven't had to apply for any grants yet. We haven't spent any tax dollars. We have spent a lot on soap and Advil. Right? Am I right? Yeah. Okay. But this is your community volunteers in action. You know, it's not the biggest projects, but wherever we can help, whether it's on private land, on public land, you know, if anyone has any projects, you know, we'll try to scrape up some volunteers and get something done. Also on a side note,
Dave Beats in the background here, and I manage the disc golf course. If you have any questions about the disc golf course, I'd be happy to answer.
Awesome, thank you, Andy. All right, and David has graciously allowed me to blaze through the Biomass Collaborative slide in my best auctioneer's voice. So the Alpine Biomass Collaborative is a group of people who basically are fostering meetings and discussion around biomass utilization and just ways to be able to use all this material that we're going to be taking off of, or need to be taking off the landscape. They're gathering a lot of information and putting that together in meetings. They have been over the last couple of years, and it's a tremendous resource. A lot of the information that has been put together in these slides or presented by some of the other folks here has come from research from those meetings and discussions. It's quite a trove of information, and it's really a great thing to have, to be able to go back and reference. A lot of these dreams of nice pictures and all that kind of thing is good talking, but there is some actual good science behind it and some research that helps understand what could potentially happen and what effects we could potentially have in the landscape. At their July 5th meeting, right here at Turtle Rock Park, I believe it's at 6 o'clock, there'll be a discussion with Susie Coker, who is a forestry advisor for the University of California, on wildfire recovery in the Sierra, specifically around the Angora fire, what worked, what didn't, that kind of thing. So, a little plug for the Biomass Collaborative. It has been a tremendous education putting this whole effort together. All the folks who have been up and spoke and sent me emails frantically in the middle of the day, the middle of the night, getting all this information. It's amazing to see what has happened here. Not just from those folks in the agencies and private lands and whatnot, but just the tremendous amount of volunteers. I mean, I literally can't keep up with it. I'm getting emails today from the Markleyville Water Company and learning all about what they have done at the 11th hour. It's pretty amazing. It's a really good position to be in relative to restoration here. We're in good shape. So there's just a tremendous amount of work that's been done. Collaboration is occurring here. Good things are happening. You guys have all hung in here for almost 2 hours. That's incredibly impressive. So we could have a lot more discussion and go on, but really, I think I want to end it here and open it up to questions, unless you have anything else, Jake.
Yeah, I just have one thing. We wouldn't be here today, all of us and all of you, if it weren't for Clint Celio, our wildfire projects coordinator, and really he is the glue that binds all of our agencies together. So we can just get a quick round of applause for Clint. And then second, and then I'll shut up. You guys all deserve a pat on the back. That was 2 hours and 54 slides, and I'm very impressed. But we have some fantastic nonprofit organizations like the Alpine Watershed Group, the Alpine Trails Association, and the Alpine Biomass Collaborative that are working in the community for you guys. And so just remember that they don't work off of ad valorem tax like a county government or anything else. They work off donations, boots on the ground grassroots efforts to fund these organizations. So they do a lot with a little, and they could really use any injection of capital or support that you guys can give to them. So just remember that it's impossible to do it with just the government alone, and it really takes nonprofit organizations and the community coming together. So we have 4 minutes for questions. I'm kidding. We'll answer some questions. Are you guys good for hanging out maybe another 15, 20 minutes? So I'm just gonna, when you ask the question, I'm just gonna repeat it just so for the video people can hear it. So we'll go with you first.
Probably already said this, but what kind of pine trees are you planting?
Okay. She had a great question. What kind of pine trees are we planting or reseeding? And we got Annabelle Monti. She is the pine tree expert.
I wouldn't go that far. So the pine trees that were planted as part of the volunteer days, as well as what the Forest Service is going to be looking at planting, it's ponderosa pine, Jeffrey pine, sugar pine, incense cedar, and I think that's it. There are some other pines going in on private properties. Unfortunately, on National Forest System lands, we weren't quite ready to plant giant sequoia, but that is a hot topic around here. So I know the giant sequoia is being planted on other properties as well.
Okay, next question. Gentleman in the back. Oh, I didn't recognize the guy with this.
Sorry, I had a mask on. David Griffith, Alpine County Supervisor. To me, what's the most important thing is what does the community want? We've heard from all the agencies, but it's the people that live here. What do you want this to look like in the future? The bottom of the slide, it says, what's next? Do we want it to look like the Washington fire? The reason I'm asking these questions is there is a possibility of a lot more money coming for forest restoration. And I didn't know this yesterday, but this morning I got invited to a meeting next week where I'm going to be asked, what does the community want? And there's probably going to be quite a bit of money behind that. So I'm listening to try to see if there's a consensus as to where we as a community want to go with this. Thank you.
All right, I think we had a question right up here.
Oh, hi, I'm Veronica Daly. I live on Pleasant Valley Road. Not all the time, but now that I'm fully retired, hopefully 100% time. I have a question, just a few questions. I praise all the efforts that have been done, and finding about the volunteer groups is really helpful for my husband and I have two questions for the BLM spokesperson. And one, I wondered about the boundary fence you had mentioned that was going around Indian Creek.
Yeah, what specifically would you want to know about that?
Where is it going around the Indian Creek campground area?
It'll be going along the road on the east side of the lake, the reservoir.
Okay, so what will be access to fishing? That'll be fine on that side, or?
Yes, yeah, there will actually be a walkthrough.
Okay.
A couple walkthroughs, and then on that east side, sort of open area with the vault toilet, the existing vegetation that remains could be sort of, the fence will go around that, trying to preserve that existing vegetation, and then it will tie in with the range fence, maybe the cattle guard if we could get that worked out.
Okay, because my husband and I walked around that whole area, and
Yeah,
I was just curious as to what you would have to lock up and keep going.
Yeah, no, it's really just to keep vehicles from driving in. We're having a lot of OHV issues with ATVs and UTVs just driving wherever they want to go, and we want to keep that reservoir free.
My other question was about the Kurtz Lakes trails, but it sounds like that's being managed by the Alpine Trail Association.
Yeah, I mean, we have a volunteer use agreement with the Alpine Trails Association, and my rec planner Arthur works closely with them. In addition, we have the Hot Shots, sort of as some of their preseason training, go out and do some work on that trail as well.
Because that was a great area last spring to just learn about fire in that area. It was really, and third question, nope, not for you. Another question is for the Grover Hot Springs.
I won't answer that one.
Oh, I didn't want to give it to you.
I'll let the Grover expert answer that one.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I live pretty close to Grover and I love it dearly. I've hiked there 2 or 3 times, gone as far as I can up Sawmill, which I'm not supposed to be on, gone on the other side, walked around and sort of sneaked inside. So I love it and I want to restore it. I wonder what about the water system upgrades, because I understand that's a big part of not being able to open up the pool for any swimming. Is the water systems, is that like something that won't be handled for 2 years, or what's?
Yeah, it's gonna be a small fix and a big fix, so both, yes.
Okay.
So there's gonna be an intermediary step to keep the water flowing, and it's mainly drinking and campground water. And then a bigger fix to, a 20 or 30 year fix, which is needed. So we're limping along.
The short fix would be how long?
How long till it's fixed?
The short fix for the pool.
I hope to have it done by mid-July, and it would keep us going through the summer.
Oh, great.
With a limited camp, like the campground's limping along.
Yeah, okay, great.
Better than being closed altogether.
Oh, great, I'm glad to hear that. And then I had just one comment for the private, whatever is happening up on Pleasant Valley Road. There's a fairly gigantic project going on that involves a lot of heavy trucks that come rolling through the night at 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. and 5 a.m.
And 2 a.m.
And 2 a.m., that's the earliest sighting. But what I wondered is, how long will that be? And can you please get people to slow down? Because sometimes they whip around those corners when they're coming back in the early morning when people are on the road. So,
Okay,
I don't know.
I'm Bob Williams, I'm the ranch manager on Pleasant Valley Road. Every time I hear anybody says anything about the trucks, believe me, I go straight to the logger. And if anybody can get a hold of me and tell me what color the truck is, I talk to that driver one-on-one. Because I've been here 30 years, raised 4 kids here. I wouldn't want logging trucks flying by. So I'm all over them, just slow down, keep it slow.
Okay, thank you, because I've been calling the police sometimes when they go too fast and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
good.
They're kids, the little kids going across the streets
Exactly.
and stuff.
Second
So
part.
we'll hold you for 2 months. Thank you.
Yeah, 2 more months, and you know, if you guys see something like that, you know, these guys are working really hard and collaboratively with the community. So anything, and they're only one man. So if you can't get a photo of the truck or something like that, it helps them. But yeah, Bob's response, just so everybody can hear in the video, that when he receives that information, he goes immediately to the driver. He addresses it immediately with the driver, and they solve the problem right there. So another question.
I'm Bill Young from Markley Village, and 2 things. David's point about what can we do to make it look better in the short term, very seemingly simple fixes. Get the trees cleared out, just going out of town. It seems, in my opinion, it may be an issue between Liberty and the Forest Service. But there are all those felled trees that are just laying there and have been laying there since, basically since the fire. We've done a lot of tree clearing, that's great, but there's a lot that have just been left. And Annabelle knows what my next one is, because I ask it every time. The burned out car at the end of Sawmill Road. Is there any update?
No, Bill, I have no update on the car. I'm sorry. The issue with the salvage of the vehicle is without the VIN number, our law enforcement, our officers, nobody will take it. And so we are still scrambling, trying to figure out some way to get it out of there and where to take it to. I have no update for you, I'm sorry. 1-800-CAR. I think somebody already scrapped it for metal, so I think that's already gone.
He doesn't need a mic.
Go for it.
Quick question, and I'm not sure who to address it to. Is there a centralized location, website, someplace you can go to look at what volunteer opportunities there are? I noticed the Alpine Trails Association was mentioned, the Alpine Watershed Group. You guys have a website. Where do you go to find out how to help?
Alpine County CA.gov, we have some information there. The Alpine Trails Association website is?
The alpinetrails.org.
alpinetrails.org. Alpine Watershed Group is?
alpinewatershedgroup.org, and we also try to post on the county website as well as on the Chamber of Commerce website.
Yeah, alpinewatershedgroup.org. Another great resource to follow is if you go to Facebook, the Alpine County Facebook, you can always leave us a message, and we can always direct you into those locations as well for those volunteer opportunities, if you like Facebook and haven't gotten sick of it by now in your lives.
So both the Alpine Trails and the Alpine Watershed Group, you have a calendar listing upcoming opportunities to help?
Yes.
Thank you.
Becky?
I had two questions and comments to all of the collaborators. Thank you all for so much for all that you've done. It's an incredible amount of work, and Liberty, and Cal Fire, my one comment is about the logging trucks, and I know it's gonna be a big relief when they stop coming down, tearing down the hill in Markley Village, but I think we all have to be aware that a lot of that's gonna keep happening as the Forest Service does some of their work, some other private property owners in the area do some of their work. It's gonna be an ongoing thing throughout the whole entire burn area as some of these projects continue to get done. And my question was for Matt Setti. Did I understand that you were talking about several private property owners that you're working with? It's more than the 800 Stormcrow acres?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So in addition to the Stormcrow, Nevada Environmental Consulting was named the technical service provider for the Farm Service Agency. So we agreed to provide assistance ensuring that private landowners were eligible for funding through that program. A number of those, a dozen or so of those 16 applicants are also our clients, and so we're actually implementing those projects. So I think right now we're about 3,600 acres in total is being funded at 75% level, and that equals somewhere about $3.8 million of federal dollars coming into Markletville.
And that's all fire recovery? Or
It's 100% fire recovery.
We'll go you, and then you in the back.
Okay, I don't think I need a mic. Sandy Bryson from South Lake Tahoe. I lived here since 1979, and I love Alpine County, and I've been all over the backcountry, so it's just like the back of my hand. My question is futuristic, because the what next is there, and I'm wondering, and this is primarily for Liberty, but also for anybody else that can chime in, this is thinking ahead. Has there been any discussion about solar power in this county, i.e. airport, available lands for paneling, perhaps doing a community solar, which can bring in some funding, and ways to mitigate future fire damage which knocks out power?
Yeah, so I guess I'll come up to the front here. Elliot Jones with Liberty Utilities. So we have explored a couple of different opportunities for either solar or more so battery storage for our distribution line that comes in and feeds the communities of Woodfords and Markleyville. So for anyone who may not be familiar, the distribution line that feeds all of the customers here comes over from Nevada, from the Moeller substation in Nevada. I think it's located in Gardnerville. And so that line comes over. Liberty Utilities then maintains and operates the line from the state line all the way down. In the past, it's been a discussion around reliability, where there have been instances, and there still are, where the source of power is lost on the Nevada side, and we have no additional feed to California. So we have explored the possibility of battery storage, where we have our own source of power that would get us through a day or two of an extended outage that can continue to feed the customers here that we serve in Markleyville and Woodfords. That project, as it stands now, has been applied to the commission, to the California Public Utilities Commission. We have not had permission to implement that project yet. I believe it's still on the table, and I don't have all the details of where it stands today. But more specifically, how that impacts the future and fire, that project of that scale wouldn't necessarily eliminate these overhead power lines that we have that are distributing power to everyone. So there's a whole topic around what we're doing for wildfire hardening of our system, covered conductor, different types of hardware that are less, or that are more fire resistant, would cause less sparks. There's a lot of work that we're doing around our service territory, and part of that's happening in Markleyville as well, that until we can eliminate or make a smaller scale, sort of maybe like a microgrid or solar and battery, it has to feed only a finite amount of customers in order to eliminate those long power lines that go from that source all the way to all the other customers. So our future plans for wildfire mitigation are to harden the infrastructure to make it more fire resilient, but there's really not a magic bullet at this point.
Well, PG&E has been kicking and screaming. They are undergrounding a lot of wire. Is there any thought to do any of that?
It has certainly been a huge topic of conversation, and that's a very big commitment that PG&E has made. We are actually starting to analyze the possibilities of that, and we have definitely analyzed the cost of it compared to, say, doing like a covered conductor project, and the costs I can tell you are a lot higher, threefold higher than just a conventional hardening of an existing overhead power line. We are putting in underground for new developments and different types of new infrastructure, but to replace an existing piece of line and put it underground is something we're trying to work through the logistics of how we can get those costs down to make it.
Okay, and for both you and also Clint, I don't know if the community has discussed this, but we tried for years to get the airport electrified, and that has been an ongoing kind of, and now it's sort of like a no-brainer that it would be so cool to have, and solar would be a natural over there, I would think. So what are your thoughts on that in the future?
My thoughts are, let's get this all cleaned up, and then we can have probably some staff time to actually allocate towards that. But I think right now we're still in the process of restoration and recovery, and I think that's a long view, which I do believe is something worth entertaining. But right now we couldn't give you any definitive answer. I know we had a question in the back, and we're going to do a couple more questions, guys, and then I think we'll throw out the cots and let everybody take a nap.
I had a couple questions. One, Clint, it's great to see you in that coordinator position. So just to add to your assignments, if I could, it would be great to see. Looking at the community wildfire protection plan and how all these projects fit together, and where are the missing pieces? Because we've seen all of the mapping and a lot of it, but to really go back and look at what the California Fire Safe Council is doing, it'd be nice to see it all in that context and see everything together and where the gaps are. So.
Yep. So actually, as part of this grant that I'm working on, updating the CWPP was a major bullet point in that.
Excellent.
Updating the CWPP identifies the projects but doesn't get them shovel ready. So we'll further define those projects and then figure out how can we get the environmental compliance and additional funding to get them done. I've been the architect of that CWPP for over 15 years, and so we're gonna, with the advent of the other Firewise communities and activity in the other parts of the county, we're gonna break that up so that each community can really take that element of the CWPP that is theirs and own it. What I'm talking about specifically is Kirkwood, which has a chapter in it right now, and Bear Valley, which has a chapter in it right now. But those communities have matured enough in their seeking of grant funds, developing their projects and whatnot, that we'll actually begin to break those out, and those can be their own standalone CWPP. So updating that document is absolutely going to happen. Getting all of this information under my belt will probably continue to take through the rest of the summer, and I'm guessing I'll spend a day or two in a fire truck between now and the end of September. But starting in September through, probably the December, January timeframe is when I expect to get that document updated and sent back out to the community for review. The Alpine Fire Safe Council, the Kirkwood Firewise Community, Bear Valley, the BDRI group, all those local entities will be instrumental in reviewing that document, making sure that those projects make sense. Then we'll engage the rest of the partners that are in the room on the neighboring properties.
Great, thank you. My next question is related to how we are in Markley Village, as I think many folks are. Numerous people have brought up the constant noise, dust of logging trucks. We are by no means done with all of the logging trucks and all of the disturbance that is just going to continue to barrage our community. So I'm really hoping that through this coordination effort that you've started, and I really applaud you in doing that you can be looking at all of the projects together and all of the impacts of, there are literally hundreds of logging trucks with all of their noise and everything that goes along with that, with all of the support vehicles and everything. It's a real hazard just walking up and down the streets. And so if everybody can be looking at noise and safety and the impacts on our community, and not just of the Forest Service project, but the Forest Service with the private lands logging, with whatever's happening with state parks, what's happening with Liberty, what's also going to be happening with the Markleyville Water Company, it's all going to be happening at the same time. So we're really going to be go move somewhere else for 3 years, I don't know.
Or get your CDL and drive a logging truck, that's what I'm hearing. Lots of employment opportunities.
Because it's going to be bad. And then, so I just had to make note of that. And then lastly, we have yet to have a meeting that has anything to do about what went wrong with the fire. Yeah. And I still feel like it's part of recovery to be talking about why isn't emergency services here telling us what's going to happen when we have another fire on July 16th and how they're going to respond to it and how the Forest Service is going to respond to it, what county is going to do and how that's all going to fit together. And every one of these meetings, no, you can't talk about it. This is about recovery. Well, guys, we've talked about recovery for a really long time, but we also need to have some idea what's going to happen differently next time.
So I'll go ahead and put another hat on. We'll kind of turn it sideways here. That's a very good point. And I think that the time is coming for that meeting. I do want to illustrate to you that just because you haven't heard it doesn't mean it hasn't been going on. And there's been difficult conversations had, decisions made, assumptions made, and we're moving forward. And Brian can attest to this as well. We have continued to meet as fire service agencies and public safety entities in recent months to make sure that we all have an understanding as to how we're going to move forward, how we're going to do our collective best to make sure we don't have that problem again. I think it's like this exercise, though. It's really important for those collaborators who are providing that service for the public, to you, to make sure that we're on the same page, right? The lovely thing about family reunions is you don't have them out in the public so you air your dirty laundry, right? We want to be able to make sure that we collectively have an understanding here as to what we're doing and how things overlap, so that when we do have that public meeting, and I know that there are folks who want to do that, want to be able to address that to the public, we can do so in a positive and beneficial manner. It's a painful experience we all went through. And there's certainly a context for that discussion in terms of lessons learned, and we want to make sure that we keep it positive in that frame. Brian, do you have anything you want to add to that, or? Okay, thank you. So more to come, more to come.
Yeah, so I think we have time for maybe 1, 2 more questions. It's looking like I'm not seeing any hands up, but just know that, this isn't the last meeting that we're gonna have. This is gonna be a continual effort and exercise into how we can continue to provide more information on restoration, provide more information on future response to fire. But it takes all of us working together, and it takes the public being involved. So stay involved, stay engaged, try to stay positive. I know it's frustrating. And just know that you guys are broken, battered, and bruised through this whole situation. And we've gone through it. Although we're not residents like you, we're in the fight with you. So in the trenches, we're standing next to you shoulder to shoulder. And please utilize us, reach out to us, communicate to us, and we're gonna do the best we can. So I think with this, we can call it a night. I'll see you guys at the Cutthroat for a couple of, no, I'm just kidding. You guys have a good night, drive safe, and thank you again for being here. Thank you. And thank you for our collaborators and partners.
Thank you everybody for sending me your info and putting this together with me.
Good, man. Get out there. We won't really do anything, but just take everybody out.
With this recorded the entire, oh my God.